Hello, everyone. This is Tom Knox, and I am the founder and CEO of CareFamily, and I want to welcome you to this webinar on preparing and planning ahead for elder care. First of all, I am very excited and happy to talk about this topic because it's near and dear to my heart on a couple levels. Number one, I have gone through this with a grandmother, very recently a 97-year-old grandfather. I went through it with my dad. And as being in the senior care field for the last 10 years, I have sat in the living rooms of hundreds of families as they've thought about their care needs and understand that it's a difficult process at times. It's not always easy to understand when the time is right, how to pay for it, how to find resources. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk about this over the next couple of minutes. So let's start with, does your loved one need care? And a lot of this pertains to what you see on a day-to-day basis with a family member. It's interesting that when you see a mom or dad every day, you don't always see the progression or change, and you almost have to look out for it. Other times with family members that you're visiting, like over the holidays, you haven't seen them for a couple months, you really see a change or a progression. And these are the kind of things that you may notice up front where you got to look for. The first sign, I would say, I'll break these up into four areas. The first is short-term memory issues. You may notice that something very common to mom or dad prior, how to get somewhere in the car, where they put their checkbook, or their keys, and being really not able to find them, and they may be in a strange place. Even people's names that would be very common to them. The short-term memory issues are usually a sign you need to be thinking about this. Hygiene. Wearing clothes that are dirty and continually wearing them on a daily basis. I dealt with that with a loved one where they just didn't want to really change their clothes. Some people don't want to shower anymore, and others who have a little bit of dementia at times, rooms or showers feel cold to them, and it makes them not want to get into the tub. And the last area of hygiene is they are afraid to get in the tub by themselves, and there could be a problem. The last part of hygiene I do want to mention too is if they're not taking care of themselves during toileting, they could be a victim of a urinary tract infection, which could be a very dangerous thing longer term. So you want to make sure the hygiene is being kept up, and you usually tell when things are slipping there. Proper nutrition. A lot of times people are not eating like they used to. They're not making home-cooked meals. They're eating a lot of frozen dinners. They're eating all sweets. And even when you go in the fridge, you're noticing that there's food or milk that should have been thrown away weeks ago. It's another sign. And lastly is kind of a disorientation where you're noticing that they're getting confused. I noticed visiting my grandfather recently, I found him asking me the same questions a couple times, and then he'd walk in a room, which we all do at times, but he walked in a room and said, why did I come in here? What am I looking for? And he was unable to really remember again what he was trying to accomplish. Those kind of signs may mean, look, it's time to have a further conversation about what's needed. And all these things should start with a family discussion where you try to sit in a room with loved ones. Sometimes the senior themselves should be there. Sometimes maybe they shouldn't. Sometimes it may be a spouse who's very independent, who's helping care for her husband or wife. Sometimes they're both there. But I think you want to figure out what the best dynamic is to discuss some goals and some real plans moving ahead. It doesn't mean you got to pull the trigger right away on getting care, but it's important you have these conversations. And so what are the goals you want to talk about? Well, one, do you want to keep the loved one at home? Something like 89% of people through a recent AARP poll stated they want to age in place and age at home. However, that may not be for everybody. Most people want to, and most family members help them do that. But I think you got to determine, hey, we want to keep mom at home as long as possible. We want to get care, or we want to move mom in with me. Or maybe it is time to go to an independent facility or assisted living facility. A lot of that will depend on the care requirements. If it's kind of light companionship, housekeeping, cooking, errands, help in and out of the bath, well, they can probably sustain not getting a lot of care and just getting it at choice times, which with home care is very affordable. And so you can make the choice based on the level of care. Now, if somebody is very demented and they don't know where they are, they're endangering themselves, they need constant supervision, they're up all night, they can fall in the shower or tub or when they get up, that's where a facility may be more appropriate. So you want to kind of look at what are those goals. I would give you one specific word of advice. A lot of families, especially after a crisis, kind of swoop in and try to do mass changes. Boy, mom fell and it's time to move her out of the house and put her in a facility. Or mom seems to be very forgetful and is forgetting her medications. We have to pull her out of her house and put her in our house. Those are such big decisions. They can oftentimes lead to depression on the part of the senior because they're out of their element. There is a time for it at times, just make sure it's the right decision for them. Next is steps in planning ahead for care. You want to think about the budget. We're going to talk a little bit later about the financial side of all this. But the situation is that for the most part, care in the home or care in assisted living or really care in a nursing home, unless you're Medicaid, which means you've spent down all your resources and are basically indigent, are private pay, meaning you got to come up with the funds to do it. So the budget, even though it's care, the budget's very important. And what are the short-term and long-term scenarios? So maybe a situation where you're saying, you know what, right now, mom just needs someone to come over and give her a bath a couple days a week, cook her a meal, do some light housekeeping, check in, maybe take her to the store, and she's good. So that could be maybe 12 hours a week of care. Well, that's a short-term scenario. Well, longer term, we could say, well, once mom, really can't be alone anymore, or she needs more than 12 hours a day of care, or she needs someone at night with her, we're going to move more towards a long-term scenario, which could be a live-in caregiver in the home, which companies like CareFamily offers, or even local agencies. Or we got to put her in a facility, or when she needs 24-hour supervision, I, the daughter, am going to move in with her. She's going to move in with me. You got to really look at those short and long-term scenarios. Resources. Okay. How much money is there for care? Well, you can look at it and say, well, mom has, I'm throwing this out there, $100,000 in total savings. Well, we know that if she's going to get 12 hours of care a day and she's going to go through, I'm throwing a number out there, $8,000 a year. Well, we know if she stays there, she can handle it a number of years. Well, if she needs 24-hour care and supervision, that number and budget goes up, and there may need to be more planning around it. We're going to talk about reverse mortgages and long-term care insurance and some of the other ways of getting care paid for, but if you really spend down all your resources, that's where the state, through Medicaid, will usually pick up your care needs, and which means either a nursing home or if you're homebound, getting about 40 to 50 hours a week of care. Beyond that, you really got to rely on your family and try to come up with the right team of people to help out. So where do you start and where do you research? Well, the best place is to start online. And I'm going to talk about a couple of places that maybe can help you determine what your needs are. Well, one could be a geriatric care manager. There are paid geriatric care managers who will come to the home and do assessment and kind of lay out a plan for you for moving forward. It's usually on average maybe $500, but what you would get out of it would be a plan and maybe some referrals on what next steps to take. They would even maybe give you area resources and facilities that may be appropriate. The second would be home care agencies. Home care agencies often come to the home and do assessments. They're usually geared more towards their own service, and it's kind of they will give you advice. It also is a little bit of a sales process in onboarding you with their agency, which is perfectly fine, but keep that in mind. And lastly is resources like CareFamily.com. CareFamily.com has a tremendous amount of tools, videos, webinars, things like that help you determine what your care needs are. Also, we have in our online kind of assessment registration, we're going to determine what your needs are. We have care coaches that will speak to you for free about what your needs are, and we can help you find a great local caregiver to help you out. So those are, I think, good steps to take. I would highly suggest, whether you're getting care now or not, to begin to think about building a support system. We go see a lot of families, or we talk to people on the phone, or people contact us online, and part of it in their whole equation and strategy needs to be some sort of paid care. Oftentimes. Now, earlier, maybe not. But also, you should take advantage of resources around you that can help. And there are 3 groups that I would, just to kind of explain this out, that you want to break these up into to give you a hand. And I would talk about this in your family meeting I discussed, or reach out to your network or your mom or dad's network to find people who fit in these 3 buckets. And what are they? Well, the first group is people that give you a specific time that help you plan around needs that the senior has or you have. Let me give you an example. My mother took care of my grandmother. My mom burned out from doing it. Well, what would have helped her is there was a neighbor who was willing to kind of help, we found out later, and she said, I would have come over one day a week for 4 hours and sat with him so you could have gone to the store and gotten your hair done and gone to the movies or get a cup of coffee to help you. And if my mom had those little islands of care that she could rely on, her whole situation would have been different. So there are people who can give you a specific time, and the wonderful thing, whether you're an adult child or a spouse of someone who you're caring for, you know you can plan around that island of respite when you can do some things you need to do. You can take care of yourself and get some tasks done. The next is the as-needed group, and this may be a neighbor, a family member, someone that you could say, look, I may need you as a backup. If I can't go to the doctor, or there's a day that mom doesn't have care that she really needs to go to the store, or, you know, if I'm worried because I called and she couldn't come to the house, do you mind just popping over to mom's house and helping her, drive her, stop in and see how she is as needed? Is it okay if I put you on that kind of list? You'd be surprised how much people are willing to do that. They may not always be free, but if you can get like 3 people and you don't abuse it, you may have a really good backup network that can help you. And the last is drop-ins. This could be someone who's a pastor at a church, or a volunteer at a church, or an old friend that, you know, they used to go to lunch with. And you could say, look, it would mean the world to Bill or Sally or whoever the senior may be if you don't mind just dropping in occasionally and saying hello. Once a week would be wonderful. You can stay 15 minutes. Bring them a sandwich, bring them a cup of coffee, or just come over and say hi, sit at the table with them. That allows the senior not to feel like a shut-in. It makes their state of mind better. And you as a primary caregiver, or for the caregivers who are working in the family, the experience will be better because that senior feels more fulfilled. So who do you approach about building the support system? Well, I mentioned a bunch of them. I would start with your family. You know, when you're having that family meeting, say, hey, who can give some time? Some people are out of state and they can provide money or resources. Everybody can gift their skills, their resources, their network of friends and family in some way to help. Next would be neighbors. You know, we have a lot of seniors who've been living in that same community for 40 years, and although you may not think they have fast friends, you'd be surprised how many people and how many neighbors want to look out for that senior, who would be willing to fit maybe in a couple of those buckets, and that would make you, I know, feel a lot better when you're helping somebody. Church is a powerful part. A lot of churches now, with the senior population boom, have built senior ministries that this is part of what they do. They have volunteers, and they have maybe even a lay minister whose job it is to minister to the senior population, stop in, pray for them. But a church is another great way. Talk to your doctors or therapists about people they may know or ways of helping. And the last is getting a caregiver, getting a professional caregiver. And, you know, the nice thing about home care is you can get it for, you know, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, just a bit of time. It can be very affordable, and it gives you kind of all the benefits of someone you can rely on and someone who's trained. And as the care increases over time, that person can grow with the care. Let's talk about, again, in preparing and having the talk with your family members and the senior themselves, make sure that as we talk about the goals, you're understanding clearly what they want. And part of this will pertain into some legal items and decisions they may make. because you're going to be talking about moving out of the home, ownership of the home, selling the home, where resources are coming from. A lot of times seniors are very afraid to commit to paying for care. So you want to do your homework, try to find the really affordable options, and lay out, here's a facility, here's, nursing home, assisted living, here is care at home, here's a couple ways we can get started at an affordable level, and then kind of work gradually into the experience. And in considering home care, the nice thing that I would say is that if someone does not need 24-hour care all the time, it is certainly more affordable, and it relieves the stress knowing someone's there and stopping in. And I'd like to say that if people do need 24-hour care, live-in options are extremely affordable, often less than a facility, and it provides 24-hour care at home. The financial resources, and I want to take a little time on this, we talked about in the meetings with the family, determining the goals, staying at home, moving to a facility. What are my resources, short and long term? And then what are other areas I can utilize to pay for care? I'm going to talk about a couple of them. One is check if mom or dad have long-term care insurance. It's probably now at about a 15% utilization rate with people getting care. And oftentimes the senior doesn't remember buying it. And it's often through a company, Gemworth, John Hancock, MetLife. But it's not an Anthem. It's not a ARP, it's not a Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security program. It's a private insurance that at some point they bought. They may be paying bills on it that they don't even know. I was in someone's house one day, and they were talking about care and how are they going to pay for it and everything else, and the dad goes, you know what, I bought something years ago. Get the shoebox from the top of the fridge and pull it down. Anyway, he pulled out a policy that had $150,000 in care because it was a long-term care insurance company product. So you want to make sure you're looking at that. Reverse mortgages. A reverse mortgage, if you own your home, is an excellent way of taking some equity from your home and allowing you a monthly check or a lump sum to pay for care. The advantages of this are you never, ever, ever get kicked out of your house, even if you use up the equity you've been given. They cannot kick you out. They cannot charge you additional funds. Number two, it is government regulated, heavily regulated for the protection of the senior. Number three, you don't have to pay upfront costs, but you do want to be aware of the closing costs that will happen at the end of the time when you're in the house. Excellent options, not for everybody, but I remember being across from a lady one time who needed someone to come over every day to help her out of bed, put on her stockings, make her breakfast, give her her meds. It's probably 2 hours a day. She couldn't afford it. She felt like she was on Social Security, and I was there with the daughter. Well, it turned out she also owned her home outright. And it was a modest home, but there was equity in there that she could use some of to get care during a couple remaining years of her life. And the daughter was thrilled because they didn't lose the house, but there was resources to pay for care. And under the government front, Medicaid again, once you're spending your money down to $2,000, and be careful how you spend it down, look online about the rules for that. But once you spend the money down, and that person's down to only $2,000, they can still own their home and a car, though. Medicaid will provide home care or nursing home care. And lastly, is if you or your spouse, mom, dad, was a veteran, the Veterans Aid and Attendance Benefit, which you can see on the CareFamily resource site, quick tip videos, we give a lot of information about it, can give you a pension of up to $1,900 a month, additional pension for care. There is a free download on 5 ways to save big on senior care at info.carefamily.com. Great way. That's a downloadable document. Talks about all these ways of paying for care in depth. And, great resource for you. I want to conclude with, our story's your story. We've been through the same thing. I personally have. That picture that you're looking at right there is me as a baby. I'm on the lap of my great-great-grandmother. Next to her is my great-grandmother, my mother, and my grandfather. 5 generations, and my mom has me put that on my desk to remind me all the time of why I'm doing this. There's nothing more important than these decisions in the last decade of life. and making sure that that person has dignity, peace, independence, and safety. So hopefully these things will help you. There's areas on our site to ask an expert if you have any questions about what's going on in this subject and you want a little more advice. Or you can also call our helpline at 877-444-4112 and talk to a care coach who can help you out. And hopefully we can help you find a caregiver that would be a great fit for mom or dad. So we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.